Boom. All right, we're back for another episode of Hard Out, my favorite movie. This time our guest is none other than Dylan Avery, famed maker of the Loose Change and Black and Blue documentaries. He's got a new feature film we could touch on for a minute that he's, I think, what are you, in post now, or are you all wrapped up?
Yeah, we're in post. We're doing edits, cleanup, sound design, music, all that stuff. So,
we're there.
We're in
same
post.
Spot we are in Cactus Jack, which, like all episodes in the foreseeable future, this episode is brought to you by the film we made, Cactus Jack. So if you stick around at the end, you can see a trailer of it. Go to cactusjackfilm.com. You can pre-order the film, shit like that. But we're here not to talk about that. But first off, your favorite movie, which is Fight Club. But we don't want to spend an hour just ladling and lathering David Fincher et al. With fucking effusive praise. So you asked if we could talk for a bit about your favorite bad movies, which sounds fucking delicious.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit on Fight Club first.
Well, actually, though, isn't the first rule of Fight Club we can't talk about Fight Club anyway?
What are we doing? This whole premise is
we're breaking the first rule, man.
So, but yeah, you did say if you had to pick a film, which we readily agree it's a fucking absurd question. Like, part of the running joke of this whole thing is we can't even pick a favorite. So for us to ask others to is kind of funny. But since you did pick it, you want to tell us why it would be your favorite?
Yeah, I mean, our discussion came with the caveat / asterisk that, for a long time, that was my go-to answer whenever I was like, oh, what's your favorite movie? And I think for a lot of people, especially in my age range, Fight Club came out. I mean, first of all, it came out in 99 along with a long side of many other highly influential films. You had Dark City come out the same year. You had American Beauty. A lot of great films came out in 99.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's almost kind of hard just to pick out of all of those. But, when it came out, I was wrapping up high school. I was getting to that point. I was a sophomore at that point when it came out in 99. Didn't really wind up seeing it like many people until after it hit theaters, after its somewhat questionable marketing approach. So not a lot of people really saw it in theaters. So I was part of the group of people that saw it later on once it hit home video and DVDs and stuff like that. So I don't know. It kind of came out for me at that perfect time. And I have been thinking about this actually leading up to this appearance. And I think the best way to maybe, jump onto that asterisk / caveat is that, like, when you're young, you think Tyler Durden is cool. And, you look up to Tyler Durden, but the older you get, the more you idolize with Jack, the narrator, you more realize that, like Tyler, is exactly what he was, I think, ultimately portrayed to be, which is the antagonist of Fight Club and the bad guy. Mm-hmm. But it's funny because Wisecrack, like 2 days ago, just started a new series called Film versus Book, or Book versus Film. I can't remember which. And the first one is Fight Club. And in that video, not only do they go about the differences between the book and the film, like how he first meets Tyler and the circumstances there. In the book, he meets him on a nude beach. In the movie, he meets him on an airplane.
Have you read the book, by the way?
I have. Yeah, I have.
I read it years ago, like 15, 20 years. Probably. I mean, this movie's 21 years old, which is fucking amazing, too. Like, how time flies. Good Lord. I mean, it feels like it could have been made yesterday just because Fincher's so next level and his look and aesthetic was so ahead of its time. But, I did not recall that from reading the book, though, The Nude Beach. I did want to touch on it.
You read it after watching the movie? You weren't familiar with the book before seeing it? Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. But that was also one of the interesting things that they brought up in that the movie, there were these little touches that Fincher, who did the screenplay adaptation on that? Was it Goyer?
Jim Oles. I don't know exactly. Yeah.
Yes. There you go. Thank you. But yeah, and then in their adaptation, they made a couple of subtle changes to Tyler. So, for example, when he holds up Raymond K. Hessel at the convenience store, the gun's unloaded. When they're doing their big demolition job at the end of the movie, all the buildings are vacant. So it's in the movie, Tyler operates more on the threat and the idea of violence than actual violence. So I think that was one of those conscious choices that they made. My dog wants to know what's going on in here.
Join the conversation.
The question is, was that the studio softening it up, or?
Yeah,
I feel like that had to have come down to Fincher, whether or not he's the one that mandated it, or whether it's one of the conversations that he had with Jim as they started to adapt the book. Is like, I want to make sure that there's a certain can't think of the word, not benevolence necessarily to Tyler's actions, but there's like a way out always.
Yes,
It's like,
exactly.
well, yeah, I held the guy up at gunpoint, but the gun wasn't loaded. It's like Raising Arizona. It's like, it ain't armed robbery if the gun ain't loaded, that kind of thing.
It's a good way to do we always talk shit about that book Save the Cat as far as screenwriting goes and how prescriptive it is, but it's a good way to make an anti-hero a little bit more lean into the hero versus the anti,
I don't know why it's so cool to talk shit about Save the Cat. I mean, for me,
Save the Cat's here's the problem with Save the Cat. It's what it did to the executive side of things. That's what most screenwriters gripe about it. Like, as a book, it's pretty solid. Now, to say this has to happen on this page and shit is ridiculous, but that's our rule to break and shit. That's fine.
But it's like, if you're just trying to wrap your head around general structure and like it breaks things down in a way that I think books previously had not, like even McKee's Story, which is a great book. I don't think he went to the lengths of like, all right, well, here's the number of beats you have to have in your film. Here's the amount of time that you should try to have elapsed between those beats. Here are some tips, and here's some things that other movies have done that make it fit into this formula. I don't know. Like that was one of the first books that I read where I was like, we
still use beat sheet terms and shit. Like, we don't completely reject or hate the book. I'm just saying, if you're talking about screenwriters, it's about the development side and how every executive who read it got this shorthand, and they are sticklers for the prescriptive aspects of it. You know what I mean? So when you get hired on an assignment and they're like, well, this fucking Turn into 3 or the Long Dark Night of the Soul should be happening around page 75 and shit. It's like, dude, different stories are different ways, Christopher McQuarrie was just talking about structure. If you're writing in an entertaining manner, structure is what happens. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to follow this prescriptive,
the formulaic
3-act structure. It's very studio friendly. If you're writing tent poles and shit, great. But I'm just saying,
it has its place.
Yeah, it has its place. It's a tool. Learn the rules, break them, etc.
It was very handy for us because especially my writing partner Corey, he had never really written a script per se, which isn't like to talk down or talk shit. I'm just saying, like, for him it helped immensely too, because we literally we had index cards all over his dining room wall, and for the first months of writing, it was just like, all right, well, here's the space that we have to work within. Maybe we can take this beat and move it here. And here's a perfect example of kind of bucking the trend of Save the Cat, is that originally the all is lost moment was going to be Zoe and Lynn, his wife and daughter, taking off and leaving Oneana. But the more we started working on it, the more we looked into it, we were like, well, no, we can't really do that. So maybe we'll do something different for the all is lost moment. We'll have the wife and daughter leave at the midpoint, which again feeds off of the catalyst on page 12. So it still worked. So we didn't that was my thing. Well, all is lost. We got to have some kind of a downer beat here at this particular point. But then instead of it being his wife and daughter leaving, it was them coming back, it's a different kind of downer point.
That still fits his midpoint anyway, his midpoint reversal. Yeah. That's also a big loss moment, etc. So.
And a lot of that harkens back all the way to the hero's journey and the descent into the cave is around the same time as the Dark Night of the Soul and everything. So yeah, it's kind of a repeating pattern in storytelling.
Yeah, it's very Campbell-esque, but and again, that's not a fault of it. It's just that there are some of the movies we love the most completely eschew those quote unquote rules. You know what I mean? And the best thing to do is to know those rules and then subvert them.
Know when to break
different ways and shit. Which Fight Club again is super subversive as far as structure and everything goes, but. What the fuck even led us down that? Oh, well, I was just saying that's like an anti-hero Save the Cat moment. You know what I mean? I'm gonna put a gun to your head.
Say the buildings are vacated, etc. Yeah,
exactly.
When I saw Fight Club, I was living Jack's life, the narrator's life. I was in an office job. It totally resonated with me, and I did hunger for what Tyler Durden was preaching at the time. But I agree. As you get older, you start to realize, and the movie itself says this too thematically, that that youthful angst and energy and wanting to direct that against something in a violent way is a huge curse of especially the young man. Most terrorists and people out in the world wreaking havoc are full of testosterone and angst and stuff, so it's like a double-edged sword where it can be something that can be used for great good, but it's dangerous too. And the consumer lifestyle isn't necessarily so bad if it's done right, that you know, the IKEA life that he had. You know, I love that. I think that's you know, a nice existence, you know, like you just want the right degree of both. The yin yang table said it all, maybe, you know.
Right. Speaking again of how old this movie is, I noticed there were payphones in it. Like, that's how fucking old this movie is.
Yeah,
Payphones.
Yes.
Oh my God. So you first saw it. Do you remember the first time you saw Fight Club?
I remember the first time it was put on in front of me, and I did not finish watching it because it was with my girlfriend at the time. And this must have been around 2000. And so, you know, it was on VHS, you know, and she's like, "Oh, this movie Fight Club, it's really good. You should watch it."
Brad Pitt with his shirt off.
Hey, you know, gotta pander to your audience, yo.
Hey man, that shit almost turned me gay. That was peak Brad Pitt.
Yeah, the peak male physique is Brad Pitt in Fight Club.
It is.
Pretty much.
No, so I was introduced to it in 2000, and I think it must have been around like later that year, 2001, because I was on the, you know, I was pretty early into the early days of, you know, file sharing and DivX and all that stuff. So I think the first time I saw Fight Club, it might have actually been like a DivX rip of it.
But that was probably alone, not with a group of other dudes and shit. That's what I was wondering about, you know, if you saw
it was just me.
Yeah,
it was just me.
Which sometimes
watched
is
it with
the best way to view a movie.
Well, I think you had seen it first, if I remember right, Jay, and you told me I had to see it, so we watched it. I think it was at Orlandi Soup Kitchen that we call it, you know, my apartment there. And
I'd seen it. I saw it in a theater in Germany at Ramstein Air Force Base. I was in the Air Force for 4 years, from 18 to 22. So yeah, I saw it.
Sorry, was it dubbed or was it subtitled?
No, this was on base. This is a base theater.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we might have got to see it a little early, because I think they would get the movies a little early overseas sometimes. And AFIs and AFN and shit would work out deals, you know, with the studio, so they would get shit early for troops. But I remember it came out around the same time as Sixth Sense. No, maybe not. Well, I was in Germany. I saw both of those.
Interesting because twists.
I think you're right, because Sixth Sense was also 99, if I'm not.
Yeah, and that was the big thing.
The year of the twist.
The year of the twist and the big reveal about the protagonist.
Not the dance.
Exactly.
Speaking of which,
even like American Beauty. Near the end.
Yep.
And by the way, for anyone watching, major spoilers ahead when we start talking about the twist in this.
Right.
They'll be warned.
And
if you haven't seen Sixth Sense, a 20-year-old movie, spoilers.
Right, Fight Club is I'm referring to specifically.
Oh, Fight Club too, yeah. I mean, but again, like if it's fair game.
Right.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you haven't seen Fight Club or Sixth Sense, it's your own fault.
Right.
You should at least watch it to take part in 99 cinema.
And Jay and I've talked about this before. There were studies done that seemed to show that people's enjoyment of a movie aren't necessarily ruined by spoilers. In fact, I just watched Fight Club again prior to this, knowing we were doing this, and watching it knowing the twist that, you know, Tyler Durden and the narrator Jack are the same person. Watching it through that lens, which I had before, I've seen it more than once, but like especially what's her name?
Helena
Bonham Carter's character, Marla's POV, dealing with him, his psycho ass, you know, like what, just knowing, you know, what her lens, her POV, especially, I was just like, man, that poor woman, you know.
Totally.
But it makes enjoyment possibly better knowing the big reveal.
Especially as a writer, when you're seeing how everything's stitched together, it's pretty satisfying knowing, you know.
Well, I think there's two sides to that, because there's the one when you see a film for the first time and you see the twist for the first time and you're like, all right, I need to see this movie again with this brand new context. It can be, because I think a lot of the thrill that comes out of watching the film over and over again, and a more recent example of this for me is Knives Out. Because I didn't see where that film was going at all, and I was just like along for the ride. So like, and the great thing about Knives Out is watching it again and again. It's like, all right, well now I know the story. Now I want to analyze this more from like a storytelling and from a structural standpoint. But if I had known going into Knives Out, like the entirety of the story, it wouldn't have had as much of an impact, and I wouldn't have been driven to have watched it so many times after that, because for me, it's it's that kind of sense of discovery and kind of like analyzing things and having a context that you didn't have before. Whereas if it's just something that you read on like a Facebook or a Twitter post, it's just like, well, now I don't even want to watch the movie. Right. So I agree with you, but I think there's also both sides to the argument where you still kind of need to have that visceral first time reaction where it's like,
I'm your father, Luke.
That's ideal for sure. Yeah, then you get your cake and you get to eat it too, you know.
Exactly. You get to, right. You can do it both ways.
Well, it's like witnessing a crime is a fucking spectacle. And that's hard to top as far as the spectacle goes. But going back forensically and investigating a crime is dope too and super fascinating, you know. So it's just two different ways to experience it, which again, if you that is why spoilers are a problem. You don't want to rob someone of that first initial impact, you know.
Right.
It is a total asshole thing to do. But again, 20 years, man.
Spoiler alert. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Well, back to Sixth Sense, though. I watched that around the same time. And I remember this one was hyped. Like, it has this big twist ending and everything. And I went with a buddy who had already seen it. He's like, dude, you got to go. I saw it last night. Let's go tomorrow. We got to see this flick. So we go watch Sixth Sense. And about 2/3 of the way through it, I called it. I was like, he's the fucking
expecting
ghost.
A twist.
I knew there was a twist coming. I didn't know what it was, but I did call it, and he's like, "Damn, yeah."
I didn't. I think when I saw it, I had no clue there was a big twist or anything. So,
and you were one of the people who told me. I remember long distance talking, and you were like, "You got to see it. There's a big twist and shit too." But Fight Club, I did not see coming.
Yeah, me neither. It took a minute for me to compute too. I feel like I was a little slow on that one. Like when
Fight Club,
they were trying to give you the hints.
Well, Fight Club, ironically, when you go back and watch it again now. Both of them kind of do a little of that. Sixth Sense more so, I think, at the end, once it reveals the twist, it shows you the ways that it had planted this throughout. You know what I mean? It shows a little montage.
Well, yeah, because
him kicking his own ass.
Fight Club's reveal lasts like 5 minutes, whereas Sixth Sense reveal is like the entire third act.
Right.
Yeah, like it kind of really starts kicking in when he's flying everywhere, following Durden's path, and it realizes that people are, seeing him, like recognizing him, and it's really expert.
Yeah, it's like 2-3 scenes back to back, and then it's all third act conclusion from there. Whereas Sixth Sense kind of drip feeds it out, and once he gets that revelation, then he starts to piece it out slowly through the rest of the film, and the film ends with him, of course, band falls off and all that stuff.
And you'd see those little moments though of like the wife would breathe and it'd be cold air and shit, and with the menu in the restaurant and shit, and Sixth Sense and part of that montage. But my thing is, when you go back, Fight Club did way more work even of setting it all up. There's the little just one frame shots of Tyler Durden leaning on someone's shoulder and shit impishly throughout it, like
the penis plants or whatever.
Penis plants, etc.
And there were even other subtle things, like when the guy's pushing his way through the train, he just pushes past Brad Pitt, Tyler Durden, but then he says, "Excuse me," to Ed Norton's character, like acknowledges that he's there.
Yes, there's a lot of subtle sly shit they did, which is dope, man.
There's even a look on Tyler's face when that happens.
Yes,
where the guy pushes through, and he's like,
like what the fuck, right? I read that Palahniuk, the author of the novel, didn't realize they were the same person till like 2/3 through writing it. And then was like, oh shit. That
happens a lot, dude. That's awesome, man.
It's the Stephen King calls it, we've mentioned before, the fossil. You're like, as a writer, it's like uncovering a fossil. You start with dynamite and you work your way down to a little brush, but it's coming to the surface, and you may not know what's in there until you see it come into relief.
Sometimes it's a second draft or a third draft, and you're like, have the epiphany, like, well, shit, this is the story I was really telling all
right. Exactly. It just had to fucking hit me in the head. Yeah.
What do you think? Because you might even be able to relate this on a personal level to a degree, of making something with the best intentions, like Loose Change, but seeing some of the fallout and effect it had. I think Fincher might have experienced the same thing with some of the anarchistic shit that Fight Club might have inspired in people, you know what I mean? The for lack of a better term, which wasn't even used back then, incel types who might have taken it as some rallying cry to go vandalize shit and be anarchistic, you know what I mean?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, because in a recent interview I did with someone that was supposed to be published in Wired and then was wound up publishing in Esquire. And I knew going into it that the guy had an agenda. And after like 2 conversations with him, I just disappeared. I was just like, I already know where this is going. But in those conversations with him, I brought up that because he asked me the standard.
He's trying to blame you. Is that what he was after?
Well, he's just like, oh, well, if you made Loose Change now, what would you do differently? It's just like, well, dude, it's like that was 2005. It's 2020 now. Like it's 15 years ago. Like filmmakers make films within the context of the time period that they're being made. And if Fincher were to go back and remake Fight Club, is it fair to ask him? It's like, oh, well, knowing
we see what happened with Lucas with Star Wars, right? Remake, adding the digital effects and all that.
Yeah, but more like the social fallout that Jason was saying. I know. People are like, oh, well, would you have made Fight Club differently knowing that it was going to inspire like all these actual fight clubs in real life and all this? And it's just like, it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily fair to ask a filmmaker that, because again, someone makes a film at that period in their life, they're trying to either say something or just trying to get something off their chest, whatever. It's a capsule of that moment in time. Like Fight Club is a very 90s film. If it was made today for whatever reason, it would turn out completely differently. Yeah. Just because the era was made, like where the actors were at that point in their career, like there's just so many variables that go into how a film turns out. And I use that exact same example. I was just like, would you ask David Fincher, like if he was going to make Fight Club today, if he would make it differently? And he fought me on that. He's like, well, I don't think the fallout from Fight Club and people idolizing Tyler Durden is, the same as what happened with Loose Change at all. And it's just like, all right, well, whatever.
Well, all Loose Change did anyway. Not that we're going to jump on Loose Change and shit, but here's the thing. There's a hunger for certain things, and there's a market gap that is filled by these things. It's like there were all these men waiting for a Tyler Durden to come along. Yeah. It's not like you created this army of anarchistic young men or whatever. It's like he said in the movie, we're a generation of men raised by women. It's like that shit's real. It's out there, and they were waiting for a prophet in a Tyler Durden to come along, just like Jack was, etc. I'm not realizing he was his own prophet, but people do want to put such a load and a burden on everything. I wasn't even talking about it in that regard. I was just more of a comment on it, not at all saying you bear any responsibility, because look at the film we just are completing now. Right. I mean, shit, dude, it's way worse than Fight Club. Might be the biggest of what it could inspire or be blamed for or whatever. But it's like, dude, somebody asked us this in an interview we did recently in another podcast. Like, do we feel scared at all about what people might do if they're inspired by this awful character we created? And it's like, you can't create art worried about how people are going to, the fringe crazy people are going to take it and run with it. You know what I mean?
It's sort of an antiseptic or sunlight being the best antiseptic thing too. You're exposing that part of society that's already there, Right. And the thing with Fight Club is, it was, by the end, it was very anti all of that. It was, Durden became the antagonist, that it was like the cultish sort of aspect of the Project Mayhem guys, where they just became sheep themselves, and I think the movie made that very clear that wasn't a bad thing. It was a negative, and
I think it also comes down to how they changed the ending too, because in the book it winds up that he's in a mental institution. The aide is like leaning over and like winking, like we got you back still, Mr. Durden. Whereas in the film they specifically made a point to show that Jack wins in the end, and that Tyler is gone, and Jack has now taken over, and it kind of course corrects the ship in a way that, and even Palahniuk himself said that he preferred the film's ending to the book,
which is great and refreshing and rare, because usually you get Stephen King hating Kubrick's Shining, etc. And well, as someone who read the book and is familiar with it and loves the movie, do you have a preference? Do you think the film nailed this version of the story better than the book did, or what, improved upon it?
Fight Club or Shining?
Hey, we can dig into both.
I
was asking Fight Club specifically.
Well, we've gone over Fight Club and back a couple of times now, but I enjoyed both, and I feel like I got a good experience because watching the film and then reading the book that inspired it, I felt like I had more. There was more like fuel behind it in a way.
But you see why they made the changes they did and how they were.
I do. And I think it made for a better film. And I think the fact that Chuck Palahniuk is behind it shows that they were the right decisions. Whereas, Stephen King made his TV adaptation of The Shining that was supposed to be more true to the book.
And
the Kubrick one, in my opinion. Right.
Yeah, and like you even have Dr. Sleep, like even though Dr.
just
Sleep
watched
like that even though it's like a spiritual successor to The Shining, the imagery that they're using
nothing like it
from the original film.
Oh yeah, those shots, yes, specifically, right. But its tone and everything, I didn't find anything like The Shining. A lot of what I loved about The Shining was lacking in Dr. Sleep
Yeah, Doctor Sleep. It was cool to see the Overlook again, but that was really about it. That's all I got out of it.
For the record, I'll say Kubrick over Stephen King in this case, as much as I adore fucking Stephen King and respect the shit out of him. I mean, the maze coming to life and all that. I mean, Kubrick's
I've
movie,
read the book too, the King book, and I definitely rate the movie higher.
Master fucking filmmaker, of course. I mean, my dog is named Kubrick, for Christ's sake. But
but I am fascinated by that. The what authors of novels think of their adaptation. You know, the movies that are made from those works, and it's cool to hear that Palladio thought it was actually an improvement.
And then you have like the case of you have like World War Z, where the author's like, well, they kept the title of the book,
right? yeah,
but how could you make a movie of that anyway? As soon as he signed away the rights to it, I mean, it's a TV show.
As soon as Brad Pitt's your lead, which is funny because we're coming off of Fight Club and how many changes were made to put it more in line. You know, away from the book, but it is funny that I bring up World War Z as we're talking about Fight Club and
it all connects.
Material.
And the stories of Fincher's battle with the studio are pretty interesting to me because, you know, Jay and I have existed in that way. I'm sure you have as well.
Well, even with Seven, I mean, like a prime example where, like, you know, Brad Pitt had accidentally gotten an earlier draft of the script that had the original ending, and then the studio was like, "Oh no, that's not the right ending," and Brad Pitt's like, "No, this is the fucking.
If you want
ending.
Me in it, we're doing the
ending. I'm not doing the movie unless we do this ending. Like, I want the head in the box ending.
Yes,
I want to be a meme. What's in the box?
Right. But there's some moments in Fight Club, like, you know, the great line, "I haven't been fucked that hard since grade school."
Yes.
That was
one of the best lines of all fucking time, if you ask me.
And it's funny because
exactly.
That
was
we all know the backstory. We all know the backstory on that. Like Fincher, you know, is just like, all right, well, let me try and think of the most offensive thing I can put in, basically, in response to it. And they're like, go back to the abortion line. Oh my God.
Right. I want to have your abortion, right? And they were like, no, that's too hard. And he said, well, you know, if I replace it, you have to take the replacement. No more arguments.
It's almost like what Trump fans, or the art of the deal, like, you know, go for the big crazy ask so that you can pare back. Or Team America was a great example of that, where they had like a 5-minute long fuck scene with the puppets, so they got to cut it back and it's still pretty pornographic, you know. Some sacrificial lambs you put in there as a writer or a director.
And similarly, the rubber glove, which was something Brad Pitt came up with, you know, when he opened the door after having sex with Marla, and he had this rubber glove on, and the studio also thought that was too much until it got the biggest laughs of the movie and screeners, you know. Fucking
studios, these people. This is what I'm talking about. The ones who read Save the Cat and think that, you know, whatever. Executives. I don't know how much you've dealt with the Hollywood development side of things, but it is quite a fucking Sisyphean ordeal.
A little bit.
Yeah,
a little bit here and there.
Doing your indie thing, if you can, is the way to go. We found, at least,
absolutely,
as far as creative liberation and shit, by far. Anyway,
the less money on the line, the more you can get away with.
Exactly. I mean, you got to understand, though. Yeah, when millions and millions and millions of dollars are at risk, they're going to be risk adverse as shit. Everyone's going to be skittish and everything. I mean, it's not a good recipe for making interesting, provocative shit. That's all. Fincher is so uncompromising. I mean, this is a guy who does 70 takes if necessary to get what he wants. I mean, he does not give a fuck. But he's also well aware that this is costing $400,000 a day. You know what I mean? Like, he knows what's going on. He's just uncompromising as hell, to his credit, you know. Have you seen Mank, by the way? I've not had a chance yet.
I didn't even know that was coming out until everybody was talking about it on Twitter. So I guess at some point.
That's the problem with Netflix. You don't get that marketing push. Not that Fight Club ever got the marketing push or anything either.
There's such a glut of it's an embarrassment of riches, you know, with the stuff coming out too. It's hard to keep up with it all.
Totally.
Dude, 2021 is going to be crazy for content. Like all the movies, like Warner Brothers dumping everything on HBO Max.
We should talk about that a bit too, if you want.
That's controversial.
Feige just announced like 20 projects the other day on the investor call. They're finally moving forward with Fantastic Four. They officially announced it. Not that we knew that they weren't doing it, but man, 2021 is going to be nuts.
Yes.
Are you a big Marvel guy?
I am, only because I had a couple Iron Man comics growing up. You know, I definitely had my share of comic books. I was never really a Marvel fan per se, but I just absolutely admire what they were able to achieve, and like the interweaving of stories. I mean, building up to a movie over a decade And I think the true testament to what Marvel did and the fact that they pulled it off and how amazing it is that they pulled it off is all the other studios that tried to copy it and failed miserably.
Yes.
Like DC was like, oh, well, we'll just go straight to the Avengers, you know, like they didn't spend like 4 or 5 years building up to Justice League. They didn't release the Batman film and then the Joker film and then the Wonder Woman
Part
film.
of it is
like,
that Feige, you got to give him credit as the orchestrator of all of this. You need that one guy who's the buck stops with, who has a creative vision, you know.
Here's the thing about Feige too, is he's not just some corporate stooge. Like, I mean, this is a guy that was on set for X-Men, for Daredevil. He had seen what had worked in the past with certain Marvel movies and what didn't work. And he was able to come in to Marvel Studios and be like, look, I've been down this road before. I know what works. I know what doesn't. Here's what you got to do. And as soon as they started listening to him, the fucking dollars started coming in. And
we remember as kids, we're a little older than you, so we were there hungry for a Punisher movie, and then they gave us Dolph Lundgren, and there's that. I mean, you got Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, of course, but I remember that Captain America movie.
America was
like,
awful.
What the fuck? We deserve so much better. So when this stuff
the Hawk TV show was kind of cool, the 70s.
Yeah, totally. But it never got the Hawk like hawking out. It's like you lift a car or something. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's part of what should be admired too, is like the amount of failures that Marvel did have in the past, especially licensing their work out to other studios.
That's what it was, though. They were like, we got to stop licensing it out. If you want something done right, do it your fucking self.
X-Men and Fantastic Four both were.
Because they had no money.
Right? That's where they were at the time, yeah. I think Marvel has a much better material to work with too than DC, to be honest. Batman's cool, and Joker's cool, but most of the rest is pretty garbage, man. I don't know.
Well, look at Spider-Man and all the fucking villains Spider-Man has versus Batman has like 2 or 3 good villains. It's like you can only milk them so much.
It's like Dick Tracy villains, you know.
Spider-Man has the Sinister Six, and Batman has like the Rogues Gallery or something. Like fucking Jared, like Joker and Harley Quinn, like and the Suicide Squad. And again, thankfully, DC seems to be starting to learn from their mistakes, because now they're like, all right, James Gunn, just do whatever you want.
Yeah, just do what you did on Guardians. Yeah,
just get as weird as possible with it. There's going to be a big screen adaptation of Polka Dot Man.
Right. See, Guardians though was one of those movies where it's like, this is kind of a B property. You kind of run wild with it, James Gunn. Do what you can with it, make it fun and cool, because it doesn't fit as much into the major story at first. You know, I think they accommodated it later once it was a fucking massive hit. But
so I love that cosmic.
And now nobody wants to see an Avengers film without the Guardians now.
Exactly.
Right.
Like, it just goes to show you. I had never heard of the Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like, talking raccoon, talking tree, cool, whatever. And then like I saw the movie, and then
so fun.
They're so good.
I was into like the Silver Surfer and all that cosmic shit in comics as a kid, Galactus and just all the shit in space, and it just gets nuts, man. It's like a fucking mind-bending stuff, and a lot of Guardians is taken from that source material. But the problem is that Fox owns Silver Surfer, so they actually gave a lot of like the whole Ego, the Living Planet, all that shit with Kurt Russell and everything. That was all Silver Surfer, and they gave it all to Guardians of the Galaxy because Fox owned the Silver Surfer.
They're going to make a surfer movie eventually. They're going to do it right.
Yeah, they have to. It'd be amazing.
And they do got to cast Michael Fassbender. It'd be sick. Anyway.
So is Fight Club your desert island movie? Like if you were stuck on a desert island, is this the movie you'd want to see over and over, or would you choose something else?
Oh, God, that's such a tough question.
It is, because there's a few ways to go about the desert island thing.
Yes, porn.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, it would have to be something that I could watch over and over and over again.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
I will say, I know you want to move on from Fight Club too, and I do want to get into all these crazy bad movies that you enjoy. But I will say, rewatching it again, it had been probably 10 years. And I went to watch it, and I have like some 10th anniversary or 20th anniversary or some shit Blu-ray that has like 4 commentary tracks on it. Ooh. And great commentary tracks, like one with Polaniak and Jim Ools, and one with Fincher by himself, and then one with Fincher and Brad Pitt and Ed Norton and shit. I mean, it looks amazing. And I thought about picking one of those since I'd seen it so many times, but I'm glad I just said, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to watch the movie, give it the respect and due it deserves. And it was amazing. I hadn't seen it in a while.
Yeah, it's rich, man. Yeah, I forgot how good it was.
Killer movie, dude.
Well, and I do have
the writing is on point.
I do have a somewhat specific memory to that because, again, the first time I watched it was on VHS, and then again when the first time I saw it, if at all, was on VHS, and the first time I finally watched it, it was a DVD rip. But I remember in 2009, before Blu-rays were really going mainstream, and there wasn't a Blu-ray of Fight Club, anything like that. I managed to find like a DirecTV like HD rip of Fight Club or something, and it was like 8-9 gigs. It was like super high quality, and I could actually for the first time see the grain in the movie, and it was like a big deal for me because it's like, wow, I'm not only seeing the whole image, but I can actually see like the grain in the film. And it like just that alone gave me like this whole new respect for the film. Like, oh, the movie has grain, so I respect it. But I felt like I was seeing it again for the first time in a different way.
One other thing I want to say about it too
actually resulted in more grain than typical too. I was reading a little bit on that they actually wanted that grain, that additional grain, and I appreciate that too. Yeah. Go ahead, Jay.
Aesthetically. Well, hold on, blowing out some herb. One thing I wanted to ask you before we move on from it is, having read the book and the film, I don't remember the book that well, but I remember. All right, first off, there's a couple ways you can take this. As soon as the film kicks off and it has that strange coming out of the strands of his DNA, essentially all the way up through his skin, it takes that cellular journey up into the real world, digital journey with the Dust Brothers kicks in, right? The fucking music and everything, the energy of it's propulsive, it's crazy. You're like, all right, I'm about to take a fucking ride. But as I was watching it this time, I was like, you could very well swap that music out and just have straight horror type music. You know what I mean? Like, so when you think about these decisions you make aesthetically, or even just genre decisions, which way you lean into it, think back to the book. I don't remember the book having that energy. When I read the book, I don't know if I read the book, if I had read it before I saw the movie, if I would have been like, whoa, what the fuck is this? Like, I didn't know what they did with it to be so energetic and chaotic and shit. You know what I mean? Which, I think it was the right decision for the film. It has this crazy propulsive energy, the way it's montaged, and the voiceover just carries it. It's like a river that you get caught in the currents of, and it takes you away, which is dope. Now, I did read the book, and I don't remember it being quite like that. It does take you on a ride for sure. Polania does that, but I don't know. I just didn't know if you had any thoughts on that as far as having read it and seen it.
That opening is definitely a decision. It's definitely a choice.
Sure.
I would have to
like balls on the table.
Yeah. I myself would also have to go back and reread the book because I haven't read the book since like 2001, 2000. Because I saw the film and then got the book, and then I probably don't even have the book anymore. I'd have to revisit it.
Right on. All right.
I read that opening sequence going through the brain, the fear center of the brain and all that, was the studio wouldn't agree to the cost until they had seen enough of the actual, dailies and the edit to be comfortable. And then they finally, after some time, green lighted it. So he had to kind of convince them to spend the money on it to assure them that the movie's good enough to be worth the extra expense.
I will say too, as I was watching it, first off, it's like all that stuff's super cool. All the Fincher-esque shit of going through walls and down all the, we're going to go through everything to get down to the basement, but you could very easily just cut there. You just cut to a shot of the basement.
Right, exactly.
And I started wondering like how much different the film would be, if I would prefer it that way or not. I mean, Fincher did his thing and I love it the way it is, of course, but it is interesting how there's different ways to play it. And then I started thinking, this is kind of speaks to what Chris said earlier. He was talking about Marlo's POV, but I just started thinking, I would love to see a version of this without Brad Pitt in it, where it's purely just Ed Norton talking to himself and shit and walking around just to be fucking crazy.
Well, the funny thing about that is that I do believe they do have enough footage to actually make a Tyler Durdenless cut.
Right.
Because from what I remember, David Fincher shot every scene with Tyler Durden as two versions. He shot one with Tyler Durden in it, and one with Jake. Because
they need to put that out.
They have to.
It happens. You see glimpses of it very briefly in the reveal scene because you see the flash of the corporate building where they're rappelling down the side. You have Edward Norton yelling over his head, "You are not your job." So that's one of those examples where they probably shot it with Brad Pitt. Also shot it with Edward Norton and decided, all right,
I want to see the Ed Norton cut because I think I might prefer it.
That would be very.
I think it would be insane.
Yeah,
I would love,
especially after the spoilers blown. Yeah.
there's been like so many successful like signature and fan campaigns, like the Donner cut of Superman 2 is a perfect example.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a petition for them to cut an Edward Norton only version of Fight Club,
Let's do it.
Yes.
I would be right on that fucking
Hey,
petition.
Soderbergh, get that shit from Fincher and cut it like you did Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones, yes.
Yeah, because there's little glimpses of it throughout the film, and maybe they didn't do every scene, but from what I remember hearing, every scene that they shot, they made sure to at least get one take of just Edward Norton in it.
Well, part of it speaks to the big reveal.
Smart.
And that's something Chris and I have come to a conclusion over the years, that the big reveal is kind of overrated a lot of times. You're doing all this work and building this house of cards, but sometimes just as interesting or maybe even more compelling is just to see a fucking crazy guy being crazy
lose his mind
the whole time, and then see how these cult people start to follow him and shit, versus the trickery of it, as magnetic and awesome and shit, as iconic as Brad Pitt is in it. I would kill to see that shit without him.
I love the I am Jax device throughout it. I am Jax, raging bile duct. I am Jax, smirking revenge, all that. And me and my buddies have a jam band, and we're making an album that's just all of those. So it was good to watch it again too, to make sure I get all of them. You know, I'm Jax Cold Sweat.
And that's all Palahniuk. That's all from the book.
Oh yeah, that's credit, dude. Palahniuk is. Yes. Did you see his interview with Joe Rogan, by the way?
No,
I did.
Check that out. It's great. He tells some amazing stories in there. He tells one story. A lot of it's about how even creatives have become so much less bold and so much like he was in a writer's group with Cheryl Strayed, that chick who wrote that book Wild. They made a movie with Reese Witherspoon.
Great movie too. I love that movie.
That's a good movie. The book sounds amazing, but he talked about how she had written a scene. This is from essentially a memoir. So this thing actually happened. She had included this anecdote that the writers group itself, other writers were like, you can't have that in this. And I just hate that we've gotten to a point. I know so many writers, especially screenwriters, like WGA writers, they're not quite as artistic often as novelists or whatever, or just purely storytellers. And they take into account public perception and executive gatekeeper perception more. So they kind of self-censor and shit. I hate that. First off, it's like always go balls out and then fight to keep the provocative shit in. But this scene, she had talked about her grandfather or uncle or some shit would make her jerk him off when she was a kid. And then once she had found this baby bird that had fallen out of a nest, and she took it in her hand, and she didn't know if she should smother it or whatever. But the feeling of that baby bird reminded her of her grandfather's cock or some shit, right? Just this shriveled, smooth thing or whatever. And it's so provocative and so gross and amazing. It's like you can't. That's the kind of shit as a novelist you're gunning for, honestly. You know what I mean? But the fact that
compelling, provocative material.
Yeah, and just as far as description.
Fincher himself said films should scar you. They should leave scars.
Exactly. So for other writers to be like, you can't have that in it, shit just fucking saddens me, really. You know.
I think all good art should scar you in some way, whether it's positive or negative. It should leave some kind of an impact.
Yeah, what was that other quote? It's like it should.
It's a waste of time otherwise.
It should comfort the. What is that? Man, great art comforts the
unconsolable or something. Yeah, comfort the consoling. Damn, I don't know if you look it up, but
console the inconsolable.
No, well, basically, it's saying it should make the freaks comfortable and the normies uncomfortable. Essentially, is the paraphrase of it. You know what I mean? But anyway, let's dive into some of these bad movies you love. I don't know how much time we have left, but we labored over.
Great thing to buzz out on anyway.
Well, where should I start?
Hey, that's up to you, man. We have no clue what
just
you got.
Rattle off a few, maybe. You know.
Well,
you could talk about a general love of bad movies, but we could even get philosophical. I share that love. I mean, this shit's all subjective. So
whether it's bad or not, trauma movies, for example, are amazing in my opinion. Exactly. Some people will call them bad, but I think they're great. Most of them.
I think the beginning of my bad movie journey was definitely Best Worst Movie, a documentary that came out in I think 2009, which is basically the actor who was a boy in Troll 2 goes back like 15, 20 years later and goes back and tracks down all his old cast members, and they go on this incredible journey, including the Italian director who just keeps insisting that he made a great film and doesn't understand why people are laughing at the screen.
Sounds very American movie-esque.
Holy shit. If you have not seen Best Worst Movie and you also haven't seen Troll 2, oh my God.
What was the second one? Sorry.
Troll 2.
Well,
The movie
Troll
is
2.
about.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
So
either.
Troll 2 is the movie that Best
Okay.
Worst Movie is about. So if you want to,
So
if you
watch
want to
that
save
first.
time, if you want to save time, you'll get the essential Troll 2 experience from Best Worst Movie. But if you watch Best Worst Movie and then go watch Troll 2, you'll have an additional layer of context to it where you're like,
Yes.
oh wow.
Okay. So you recommend Best Worst first, then Troll 2.
I think so, yeah. Because then
Okay.
from there, you can even judge. You can even judge if you even need to see anymore. It might be one of those things where it's like, I had enough.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. You just gong it out at some point because you're like, okay.
It's kind of like if you see The Disaster Artist and then watch The Room.
Right.
Okay. So that was
Actually,
my next thing. Is I was going to say, like, I'm pretty sure after Best Worst Movie, then I learned about The Room, and then because The Room was right around 2009, really starting to pick up steam, and that is around when I saw Best Worst Movie. So I'm pretty sure for me it went Troll 2. The Room, and then I think Birdemic might have been the next one. And now we have two recent examples that are just glorious. These men are like experiments that have been sent down, like either aliens trying to understand how humans make film or aliens just trying to make human movies and failing miserably. Two people, Neil Breen and Derek Savage. Neil Breen is that classic example of the opening credits are on screen and it's just all his name. So you have written by Neil Breen, produced by Neil Breen, directed by Neil Breen, starring Neil Breen. And then the little extra glazing on the cake or whatever. I'm fucking failing for idioms and expressions today. The icing on the cake. The extra icing on the cake is that in the credits, he goes as far as to say, lighting, none, hair, none.
Love
and then a couple, it gets better. It gets better. A couple ambiguously titled catering companies. And then at the end of the credits, it's like any credits that start with N or B were actually Neil Breen. So basically this guy wrote it, produced it, directed, started in it. There was no lighting. There was no hair. He's running the camera and he did all the catering, which means it was probably like bottled water and fruit snacks. So this man so far has not only made like 5, and I emphasis Neil Breen's 5 theatrical feature-length films. Emphasis from Neil Breen. This man is a theatrical feature filmmaker because he's screened in a couple of theaters here and there.
That he rented the theater.
But again, like
vanity press sort of thing.
As abysmal as the results might be from Neil Breen, Derek Savage, James Nguyen of Birdemic, Tommy Wiseau, the weird Italian director of Troll 2, talk shit about the movies that they've made all you want. At least they made a movie.
Fuck yes,
Hell
dude.
yes.
Chris and I say that all the time. And that's another thing about the cancel culture, harpies and all that. It's like, don't bitch about my movie. Go make your fucking movie. Go make your movie as an answer to my movie or what you think the world is lacking as far as movies go. You know what I mean? Everyone should be making shit regardless. Go make shit that sucks. By all means, but make stuff, It's
part of a kind of a personal rule that I've tried to adapt lately. And again, even as I talk about these bad movies that I love, I need to stress at the end, like, again, at the end of the day, they still made a fucking movie. Like, they went out there with their camera, they got actors together. Sometimes they didn't, but they made a movie. And I mean, that, if nothing else, should be inspiring to up-and-coming filmmakers or people like myself who until recently hadn't directed feature film. I was like, fucking Tommy Wiseau made a feature film. James Nguyen made a feature film. Like, what am I?
Well, the Neil Breen of it, the more you can do yourself, that's kind of what we set out to do with Cactus. Well, we didn't set out to, but eventually it's like, all right, so first day of Cactus Jack cost us $800, had a crew, rented cameras, did everything conventionally, got a couple minutes of footage, and it was like, this shit's untenable. I'm going to scale back. I'm going to shoot it myself on fucking phones. I'm going to do all this. I mean, this is partly just because of budget concerns or whatever, but also just creative control. And at that low a budget, why not just make this balls out artistic statement as much as you can? Chris and I are trying to.
Yeah, when it was originally conceived, we were like, what can you do that's just as close to one actor as possible? You shoot yourselves. I mean, a guy who's podcasting Venom out into the world and getting responses back, but it's really just, it's super contained. It's just, you don't need, like, well, we were just talking about the opening sequence in Fight Club versus if you just came right in on him, with the gun in the mouth. Is it the value versus being able to just do it yourself? Like, you can get a lot of impact just out of
right. And even away from like our individual stories, the democratization of the process by technology, that now you can easily edit on your own laptop. You can do all these things. You know, you can shoot it on a cell phone.
More than ever.
Steven Soderbergh shoots fucking movies on cell phones, you know? So I think that's super empowering. I love that about this Neil Breen dude. I got to check his shit out. And yeah, maybe I'll just be like, this is atrocious aesthetically and it's hard to watch, but props. Everyone should take that example.
There's if you want a good starting point, there's a YouTube channel I follow, yourmoviesucks.org. And so if you go into YouTube and you type in YMS Neil Breen, NEILBREEN, if you type that in, that'll be a nice starter course on Neil Breen. And then
do you know who that Andrew Bowser dude is?
Yeah, I was just going to bring him up. The Worm.
Yeah, his film Worm.
Just Worm. Yeah.
He shot this shit on a Snorri cam. You know the Snorri cam, that Spike Lee thing where it's just on you wherever you move.
Oh yeah.
So he shot the whole movie on that. So it's like almost second person POV. First person. Yeah, exactly. It's on him, his face, the entire fucking hour and a half or whatever, as this guy runs around scrambling with this murder cover up and escaping these dudes after him and shit. And it's super low budget and everything, but he did everything. And that was part of the reason he did that. He's like,
so it's like Hardcore Henry if the camera was facing the other way, basically.
Yes. It's crazy. Check it out, dude. He made it for next to nothing, just with his own friends. It's pretty much done in one take. He pulled a Birdman, but it's there's two takes of the whole movie. It does split at a certain point, and that's part of the fun. Is can you guess where he spliced it? But,
I'm sure there's a switch pan cut here and a crossfade there. I'm sure there's all kinds of tricks.
But dude, again, that kind of shit we just have such a massive respect for, because in the end, if you are an artist, you don't, first off, asking permission, knocking on doors, going to the gatekeepers, wanting them to like your shit and put all this money up to make it, and wanting these actors, like we've all been sucked in and seduced by that. But there's nothing more empowering than just like willing a fucking movie into existence. You know what I mean? Where you're not asking for anybody's permission or help. I mean, we know tons of filmmakers who are held back and say, like, I need an editor, I need a DP. It's like, no, autodidactically get there on your own. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're just telling a story. It could have limitations or whatever, but do it.
Well, even
writing novels are similar too. Yeah, even more so.
Final Cut Pro has become insanely affordable compared to what it used to be. I mean, the cost used to be prohibitive. You'd have to pay like $1,200 to get the whole studio, and you could choice.
Yeah, now it's subscription models and stuff. I use Premiere, Adobe.
That's Premiere, but Final Cut is
$300.
Dude, Final Cut, I think I got it on sale at the end of last year for like $200, and like. You get software updates all the time. Like, it's fast, it runs great. Like, and especially like I'm in the big Facebook screenwriting group, and I mean, I've lost track of the amount of people who are just like, Final Cut's too expensive. What's some good free software out there? And it's just like, look, eventually, like if you're serious about this shit, you're gonna have to
put $5 away a week. Put away $5 a week, and then
compared to any other business,
dude, and nothing. Even Final Draft, like we bought that way back in like 2000. We bought it way back in 2006 when we were doing the 3rd edition of Loose Change. And I recently was just like, because I was still like using like my old copy of it, and I really needed to upgrade. So I emailed them. I was like, hey, I paid for Final Cut 14 years ago. I don't have my email or my license anymore. They went through the records. They're like, yep, here you go. Here's a code, $79 for the new one. I was like, great, awesome. And now I've got a legit new copy of Final Draft, always updated. You know,
and you don't need that shit anyway. I mean, first off,
no, I mean you can use like
these are all excuses to not make shit. You know what I'm saying? It's like
that's what I'm saying. It's just excuses. Like if you really want to write a script, you'll find a way to do it. You'll find the right software. You'll pirate Final Draft if you have to. But people who are complaining, or it's just like I have to spend $79 on Final Draft. It's like, well, you want to do this shit for a living? Then spend money to make money.
Totally, or find another way. Chris, I remember Chris first had the first scripts we ever wrote. Didn't you like create macros in Microsoft Word?
You hit like F5 for your character, and then F6 for dialogue, etc. It's just a function key. Action was F1.
Yeah.
You know,
it's
what
like where there's a will, there's a way.
Oh no, slugline was F1, action's F2. You know what I mean? And it was formatted just like any script. In the end, but I was going to say too, though, when it comes to just if you just want to tell a story, oftentimes just prose.
Yeah, that's another thing.
You can just you're as Stephen King described it. It's telepathy to the reader. You're just communicating. You almost force them to use their imagination to picture what you're trying to get across in the best way they can picture it, which might be better than whatever you can get with film. Now, I love film, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, if you boil it all the way down,
that's
there's no
excuses.
one problem is no one reads. That's the fucking problem with pros versus film. Most people just they get home from work, they want to turn on Netflix and just watch something and veg out. And there's a lot you can communicate visually that you can't.
I'm pretty sure there's a couple success stories, or at least people who tried to write a script, tried to get funding for scripts, etc., and they're like, "Fuck it, I'll make it a book," and then they put it on
Sideways. Sideways won an Oscar for script, and that was one where he was trying to get it going, and no one would buy it. So he said, "Fuck it, I'm going to write a novel." He wrote a novel, Sideways, won a bunch of fucking acclaim, and then got the movie made.
And you get it as make a ton of money. Yeah,
perfect example.
Melania too said they offered him to write the script for Fight Club, and he said, "No, I don't want anything to do with it. I just go interpret it." And I do love the interpretive aspect of all this whole world, this arena where you have a director, you have a screenwriter that adapts from the novel. Like each level of that, the actor, everything is all an interpretation down the chain, and that itself is kind of fun.
What were you saying to that, Dylan?
That's basically it. Like, if you got a story to tell, find a way to tell it. If you can't write a script, make it a book. Maybe it'll be a bestseller, and then maybe someone will pay you to turn it into a movie instead of you having to beg people to read your script and throw money on it. So, I mean, there's ways around it. And I mean, just going back to what you're saying before, I mean, that was my experience in LA for close to a decade, just pounding on doors, finding scripts, trying to get funding, having casting calls for projects that wound up never going anywhere. And just really demoralizing, just because everyone wants to make a movie, everyone wants funding for a script, everyone wants to direct. But, a year now being back in upstate New York, it was the same thing where as like Corey had been settled into Oneonta for like 2 weeks, and he was like, dude, let's write a script. Let's write something we can shoot here in Oneonta. Like we know the town, we know the city, we know people. It's a lot
Robert Rodriguez, that shit.
Asteroid. Is this Asteroid?
That's Asteroid. Yeah. And like, again, Asteroid couldn't have been made in LA. It could have been made within the studio system, but the whole genesis of that project was like, let's just write something that we can shoot here in Oneonta on our own. We don't have to beg for money. We don't have to get funding. We don't have to attach A-list actors. We can just get the script right, get a bunch of really talented people and just do it. And we did it. And like, I have this like weird post-Asteroid like thing going on where it's just like I spent so much time and so much effort of my life like fighting to direct a narrative feater film, and now that I've done it, I'm just like,
I wanted to ask about that.
What do I do now? Like it's
do it again.
I cyber stalked you a little bit, and I saw that both Loose Change and Black and Blue were originally going to be narrative movies. Is that right?
Yeah,
that they were going to be fictional narratives, and then you went documentary. What caused that shift? Like, where did you decide? At what point you decided it's better to just make it a documentary? I'm just curious about that. Like, I mean, Loose Change, for one, I was 18 when I was writing that script. And I mean, I was writing scenes that had like people rallying on the White House lawn and all this stuff and like car chases. And I'm fucking 18 years old. Like we shot a couple of the less intense dialogue heavy scenes. And I mean, the actors were me and my two buddies. Which, as we all know, never goes very well. Usually, sometimes you cast your friends and like Clerks, it goes great. But for me, I quickly realized like I don't have the time, or the money, or the resources, or the ability to make the film that I want to make. And at the same time, in those earlier cuts of the film, I had these like little documentary sections where like one of the characters would learn something, or he would be put like someone would say something, and then the movie would like break away into documentary mode. And so in like the early test screenings of the movie, everyone was just like, you need to just focus on those documentary scenes. Like the movie scenes are all right, I suppose, but I like the information. That's where it's at.
Especially for some of that compelling real world shit.
That subject matter. Yeah.
It hadn't really been tackled either. Shit,
and
when Oliver Stone did the 9/11 movie, he did that was just World Trade Center, right? I was hoping to see a JFK style movie where it like followed the terrorists and all that shit, or whatever. Like
a lot of people were expecting something very different than what they got from that.
So he's not known for just a small contained character story. He's known for the geopolitical storm, So
that speaks to what you're saying, though, that like the subject matter drives it. If the subject matter leads you towards it being more of a documentary and something that is following all these little details and such, it's definitely a different animal than a narrative movie.
Well, and that was the same thing with Black and Blue, where like
appropriate.
Yeah, like Black and Blue, I had an idea. I started writing it. I started outlining the script. But then similarly to 9/11, like I just saw more and more real life instances of police brutality. The Kelly Thomas trial was going on. And I saw all these things starting to coalesce. And I was even fighting it adamantly. Like someone even messaged me like, dude, you should make a documentary about police brutality. And I was like, no, I'm done. I'm tired of making documentaries. But I went to the Kelly Thomas rally in February 2014. I met a couple family members there. And before I knew it, I was making a documentary about police brutality.
I would love to talk about that stuff with you some other time if you ever want to come back and
Sure.
deep dive on some of those.
Yeah, and also just the switching up from years of trying to make a feature film and then finally achieving it. We are curious to just hear the lessons you learned and the journey, etc. So I don't know. We're probably very close to timing out. I try not to
that buzzer's coming up any second now. But yeah, no, I'd love to come back and talk about it.
All right, man.
Cool.
Shit.
You're alone, right?
Yeah. Is it cool if I start filming now?
No, when we get inside.
Why are you here?
I just thought it was really interesting, that someone hasn't left their basement in 6 months, not even to use the bathroom. Is that true?
Why would I want to go out there? I got everything I need right here. That's what's wrong with most people. They're weak-willed pussies and parasites who buy into that whole "it takes a village" bullshit. You know how many aliases I've used calling into radio shows?
I've had it up to my goddamn gills with the systematic feminization of this country.
Of course we want you. Get your own damn show if you think you got that much to say.
You live in your mom's basement.
Get down! Fuck you! What's so special about my loser son?
You really do hate your own mother.
She's a woman. Why wouldn't I?
There's some disconnect there, and if I could find it, what is hate? Where does it come from? Where does it go?
You want to know what gender you are? Reach down the front of your fucking pants and cheap fucking kite Black Lives Matter. Do you call horses slaves? Liberal fucktard. Enough with the parades and the rainbow flags.
Dude, this guy's... it's like pure hate, man.
I want to see something really fucking cool.
This guy is a fucking animal. He's got himself on a leash. He's itching to get off that fucking leash. And he's gonna fucking kill some people.
What a fucking show. Stop! What do we hear? Look at me! Look at me! We're gonna help you show them the light. We're gonna change the world.
This is Cactus Jack coming to you live from a studio audience.
To the man who calls himself Cactus Jack, we have watched as you have rocketed to infamy.
And you wonder why these cornered animals lash out. Pick a fucking side.
And now, we have watched as you have called for literal blood.
I know you're out there listening. It's buzzing in your ears, burrowing into your brain.
Do it.
Jack, you're gonna love this.
I pulled that trigger on that motherfucker's head.
Your VPN will not shield you. The darknet will not hide you. You and your kind are finished.
You think I'm scared of you?
Come and fucking get me.
Might I be your neighbor? Neighbor?